Hey, I'm Ninad. I went from a junior to a senior engineer in under 2 years. Not because I was the most technical engineer on the team. And the most surprising part, I was not even the most experienced. I literally went from a new grad to a senior while there were people with a hell of a lot more experience, more than 3 or 4 times my experience, who were ex-Google, who were ex-Amazon, and ex-FANG basically. But yet I was still bumped up above them. In today's video, let's see what I did differently and how we can replicate that. So in today's video, I want to talk about a couple of different things. Number one, the mistake I was making early on in my career, which was making me burn out but not see the results. Number two, the realization that made me understand, shit, I need to change the way I approach this thing. And number three, the one skill that I truly focused on, even more than my technical and coding skills, which really made the difference for me. And before moving on, just wanted to mention that on this channel, I focus on breaking down these core skills that engineers are never taught, but are always consistently judged on. So if you're one of those engineers who wants to learn these skills, consider subscribing for more videos like this and for learning these skills that are not taught anywhere else. So with that being said, let's get straight into it right now. So let's first start talking about the mistake I personally was making early on in my career and the beliefs that I personally had. So if you're someone watching this, you might be aware that the usual advice that is given out in the software engineering world is keep working hard and the results will come. Because of which I used to keep grinding out PRs, I used to keep learning new tools and technologies, learning new frameworks, basically upskilling myself in a technical standpoint. And yes, over time I was able to solve these tickets faster and in a better way, write even more beautiful code. But I did notice that because I was putting so much pressure on myself to start learning all these and to keep learning all of these things and to work harder, even sometimes put out PRs or at night or even on the weekends to show others that I'm a very hardworking person and I'm extremely reliable. The interesting thing that I noticed was that did not lead to anything because I was still getting those same feedback that, hey, I'm doing a great job, keep doing it. But the promotions were not coming. I mean, I get it. I was still new on the team. And because of taking on all of this extra work, I was actually burning myself out over time and I was starting feeling more stressed. And even through all of this, I also did notice that I was still getting the same sort of repetitive work. I was not getting these complex projects, which are usually seem to be reserved for these more senior people. I was stuck doing a lot of these execution tasks. Maybe it could be writing APIs, maybe writing unit tests or something like that. So that was also making me feel undervalued because I felt my potential was not being fulfilled, that I was putting in so much time and effort to learn all these skills, to learn these best practices and to actually put them forward. But I was still solving those, and apologies for this, but shitty work. That was also affecting my mental health going forward. And I think this continued for maybe 6 months or so before I had a realization moment, which I'll talk about next. Now, let's talk about the moment that changed everything. I distinctly remember I was in this one meeting where I was just listening in, to be honest, and there was this one principal engineer who was leading this meeting. And yes, technically he was extremely strong. But what truly fascinated me was how he communicated. Because there were other people in the meeting as well. There were leadership, there was PMs and whatnot. And this person, he was communicating with such confidence and authority that is, when these people are giving him some sort of ambiguous requirements or ambiguous questions, he was able to sort of flip it and ask some extremely great clarifying questions and sort of drive trust and alignment among everyone, no matter what complex thing was thrown at him. This really, really fascinated me because when I saw most 99% of the engineers that I was used to working with, everyone used to focus on keeping their head down, coding stuff out, taking on more Jira tickets, doing the past ones to done. But this person, he was approaching things very differently. I mean, yes, he was at a principal level, because of which he was given those complex and high level problems, but the way he was approaching them, I mean, if I was given a much smaller problem, I knew at that point I wouldn't be able to do the same thing he was doing. That is drive clarity, drive alignment, drive trust on how might be the best way to solve this. I knew the first thing I would do is get bogged down by the technical details and think about how to best implement this, but not this person. He was approaching things completely differently. He was thinking from the point of view of PMs, he was thinking from the point of view of leadership, and then he was approaching or proposing solutions based on what might satisfy these requirements instead of thinking about the most optimal solution, which is what most engineers think about. So that truly fascinated me. So after that meeting, I remember reaching out to him and Over time, I built a very good, strong relationship with him, because of which I constantly kept asking questions. He kept giving me feedback. I started actually implementing a lot of that feedback and started creating that sort of feedback loop, which not only showed him that I take feedback seriously, but I also apply whatever was being told to me. I don't just ask questions and forget about it. So the most important thing that came out of that was communication. And that brings me to my third point, the one skill that will set you apart. So that is, as you might have guessed by now, communication. So even in communication, there's typically two parts to it. There's a spoken communication, there's a written communication, and I'll touch upon both of them. Let's start by written communication to begin with. For a lot of engineers who might be a bit more introverted, speaking can sometimes be a bit nerve-wracking, because I'm an extremely introverted person, so speaking was never my strong suit. So I knew I had to do something else that can help me drive that alignment and trust without having to speak as much. So I focus on written communication. So when I talk about written documentation, I mean it as a more of a strategic type of documentation, not something that you write as wikis after the work is done, but this is something you do before even starting your work. So if you remember, I talked about how the principal engineer was asking questions to leadership and to PMs to understand what they want, and then suggesting solutions accordingly. So that's what the written documentation would sort of do, is lay out enough context about the problem, why it is important, why it's important to the business, then talk about, like, given this is important to the business, these are a couple of different ways to solve this, and then weighing on the pros and cons of each approach to know, okay, given that the business needs XYZ and that's more important to them in terms of ROI, option one provides the best value, even though it's not the most optimal, but it allows us to do it faster and gives the business this specific ROI as compared to the most optimal solution, which could be option three, for example, and then doing those proposals. So I started doing that more and more, even for the small thing that I was given, because in engineering, there's never one right way to solve something. There's always about the least worst trade-offs that you or your team might be fine with. So being that person who understands the problem and the business value behind a problem and its solution, and surfaces the relevant trade-offs so that you can propose to your team that based on the trade-offs that our team has historically agreed with, or that the leadership has historically agreed with, I recommend option one as the best foot forward. This not only shows your manager, your coworkers, even leadership, if the document reaches them, that you don't just think about the technical problem, you tie it to the business, you understand how it benefits the business, and that's the solution that you end up proposing. And not someone who just dives straight down into implementation just because that's what engineers do. So that's an example about written documentation, and now I want to tie it into spoken communication as well. So like I said, being an introverted engineer, I used to struggle with speaking eloquently. I had an issue of stuttering, using a lot of filler words, especially likes and ums and ahs. And you might have heard a lot of engineers or even people around you overuse like, and stuff like that. So the one difference this immediately makes is that even if you're 100% sure about what you're talking about, but start immediately using filler words, the person listening to you will immediately think, maybe this person is not sure about what he's talking about. Because when a confident person speaks, they have that body language, they have that powerfulness in their voice, which comes across confidently and authoritatively. So going back to the principal engineer, I used to understand that even if he was talking trash, and I'm not saying he was, I'm just giving an example, like even he was talking absolute trash, but if it was landing confidently, there was a much higher likelihood that people will still believe him because he was speaking about it with such confidence and authoritativeness. But now if, let's say, this person would have started using a lot of filler words, the person perceiving what you're talking about will immediately think, it's doubtful. I don't know if this person can be trusted with this. So that's something I immediately realized that I need to focus on. And that's what I started double downing on. I spent a lot of time focusing on my communication skills. And during all of this time, I actually put my technical skills on the back burner because I knew this is something which will help me stand out, because everyone and their dog were focusing on improving their technical skills. Could be learning new coding languages, could be learning frameworks, using AI, and things like that. So I sort of doubled down on my human skills. Yeah, because of that, over time, I started speaking a lot better, kind of like how I'm speaking now. I significantly reduced my usage of filler words. So now when I was talking, I had a lot more bass to my voice. It was a lot more stronger, a lot less filler words. My tonality was fine. So even when I was proposing something as a junior engineer, it was perceived that, okay, this person knows what he's talking about. That immediately made such a massive difference. It might have been stand-ups or just regular meetings where I was just asking questions or saying specific things, but it landed just a whole different way than it used to before. So now when you combine your written skills with your speaking skills, it sort of compounds a lot. Because let's say you first take the time to do your written documentation, to lay out all these trade-offs and business requirements and stuff like that. And now when you have to present a lot of these things, your spoken communication is so confident and authoritative and eloquent that people will most likely believe what you're trying to say. They won't question. I mean, sure, there'll always be questions and concerns, but knowing how to handle that is yet another skill which I might talk about in some other video. As you can see, this sort of compounded over time, and over time my perception went from being a hardworking, reliable code monkey to being someone who understands business problems, understands what's the best way to solve that business problems, and the best way to get buy-in, build that trust and alignment from people. That made the complete shift for me, because at my level, at a junior level, I was the only one doing that. And that actually benefited a lot, because when I was putting down these documentations, for example, I was able to conduct very, very structured discussions right on the document through the common threads, which is a very structured way of doing discussions, by the way. If you try to do something similar on Slack, information is going to be scattered all over the place. People will lose context. But now when information is aggregated in one specific document and you have a structured discussion there, it's going to work out very well for you. So that not only shows your coworkers that shit, this person goes above and beyond, this person does what's best for the team and for the company. This not only helps others with knowledge sharing and my thought process, so it sort of acts as a force multiplier as well, because it helps people understand what's the best way to provide value. As a matter of fact, now most of the engineers in my team follow the specific like documentation and stuff like that. So that ended up being a very high impact thing that I was doing, which started getting adopted by other people and by even other teams. That ended up in me coming forward as a leader as well. And that, with my other skills and perception changes, is what truly bumped me to a senior level. I want to keep this slightly high level for you to understand a big picture about how you need to change your frame of mind or your beliefs and your mindset to how you can provide the best value to your team or your company, so that your perception with others starts changing. And when that perception starts changing and you start being seen as that force multiplier and as that person who can build trust and alignment, promotion will be the absolute next natural step for you. Because why will it not? And sure, if you can continue focusing on your technical skills, learning a lot of this other stuff, you use AI, and you can continue spending 2-3 years in your current position and following the tenure-based system. But if you're someone who drives such great impact, company will have no choice but to promote you, because they want to keep the best engineers. So take this with a grain of salt. Maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't agree with this. Maybe let me know in the comments what you think. But yeah, if you're extremely intentional about becoming a software engineer who does these specific things, book a chat with me using the link in the description below, and we can talk about how it will look like working together and how I can best help you become that trusted and respected engineer. And as always, just here to help.